Which is better? Effective and ineffective thesis statements. Here, we're going to talk about which of these two thesis statements is the debatable thesis statement. Our first statement says pollution is bad for the environment. Our second one says America's anti-pollution efforts should focus on privately owned cars. I'm going to give you a minute. Think about it. Which thesis statement could trigger more of a debate? If you said the second one, America's anti-pollution efforts should focus on privately owned cars, you would be correct. But why would you be correct? First of all, look at number one. The word pollution means something that is bad in some way. Of course pollution is bad for the environment. Pollution can't be good. So the first statement is pretty straightforward. It's not something you can debate because the fact that pollution is bad for the environment is exactly that. It's a fact. However, the second statement is a statement that people can agree or disagree on. Therefore, it is debatable. You can have a debate about whether or not privately owned cars affect America's anti-pollution efforts. Some people may agree with this statement. Some people may disagree with this statement. Now we're going to look at two thesis statements and talk about which one is more focused. The first thesis statement says illegal drug use is detrimental because it encourages gang violence. The second thesis statement says drug use is detrimental to the society. I'm going to give you a couple seconds here to decide on your own which thesis statement is focused. If you said the first one, illegal drug use is detrimental because it encourages gang violence, you would be correct. Why would you be correct? First of all, let's look at the second thesis statement. It's a little bit vague, right? Here it says drug use is detrimental to society. So what exactly is included in the category drugs? There are many different types of drugs, from recreational to pharmaceutical. In what ways would drug use be detrimental? This statement doesn't exactly explain how drug use is detrimental to society. There are many ways that drug use could be detrimental, but none of them are covered in the statement. And finally, what exactly is society? That's a very broad word to use, and it's very vague. Here, does society mean our country? Does it mean the world? Does it mean the city that you live in? You need to specify. Ultimately, this claim leaves too many questions open. Meanwhile, the first statement actually specifies. It says illegal drug use. It's not just talking about drug use in general. It's talking about the use of drugs which are not legal to use or purchase. It also explains why that illegal drug use is detrimental. Here, the author is going to talk about the fact that illegal drug use encourages gang violence. Here, you want your thesis statement to make an assertion. I have two examples that emphasize a thesis statement which lacks an assertion and a thesis statement which makes an assertion. So if you look at the first one, you can tell that it lacks an assertion. The statement says, Hollywood movies, like 127 Hours and The King's Speech, are frequently based on true stories. This is not an assertion because this is a fact. These two movies are, in fact, based on true stories. On the other hand, the second revised thesis statement is much better. It says, Hollywood movies, like 127 Hours and The King's Speech, manipulate true stories to cater to the tastes of the audience. This claim actually makes an assertion. This is something that the writer can write more about. You also want to make sure that your thesis statement is specific. The first thesis statement says, I learned a great deal from my experiences as a teenage parent. This is far too general. We don't know what this person learned. We don't know what experiences he or she had in order to learn a great deal, and they don't really specify anything else in their thesis statement. On the other hand, the second thesis statement says, from my experiences as a teenage parent, I learned to accept responsibility for my own life and for that of my son. Here, we see what this person is accepting responsibility for. We see what this person is learning. Ultimately, this thesis statement is far more specific than the first, and thus you can write a much better paper about the second thesis statement. You also want to remember to focus on one central point in your thesis statement. The first thesis statement here says, this college should improve its tutoring services, sponsor more activities of interest to Latino students, and speed up the registration process. Now, this is very broad. This student is focusing on 3 different, very separate items within one thesis statement. It's going to be very difficult to write a cohesive essay that covers all of these broad topics. A much better thesis statement would be revised to focus specifically on one topic. Here, the second thesis statement says, to better represent the student population it serves, this college should sponsor more activities of interest to Latino students. This thesis statement is far more specific, and you can actually write a decent essay about this thesis statement. You also want to make sure to offer an original perspective. If you make statements that are ordinary and boring, you're going to have a difficult time getting people to read your writing. This thesis statement, the first one, says, many traffic accidents are a result of carelessness. This is pretty ordinary and kind of insinuates that the rest of the paper might be fairly dull. The second thesis statement says, when a driver has an accident, it can change his or her entire approach to driving. This is much more interesting and much more original. Many more people will want to read this essay over the first one. You also want to be sure that you avoid making an announcement rather than making a thesis statement. So thesis statement number 1 says, the point I am trying to make is that people should not be allowed to smoke on campus. Saying the phrase, the point I am trying to make, is redundant because a thesis statement is a point that an author is trying to make. You don't need to announce to your audience what you are going to say, do, or attempt. The second thesis statement is much better because it does not announce what the writer is doing. It simply says, the college should prohibit smoking on campus. This concludes our review of thesis statements. Hopefully, these tips and tricks will help you improve your thesis statement in the future and move towards writing better, more professional, academically focused essays. Thanks for watching.